January 1945. The bitter wind swept across the Pacific Island airstrip, carrying the acrid scent of diesel engines and salt water. Broken fragments of a once thriving village lay scattered under a gray sky, and the distant boom of artillery reminded everyone that war had not yet loosened its grip. Japanese prisoners of war, weary and hollow-eyed, shuffled along the gravel path that led to a sprawling camp surrounded by barbed wire. The sun had just risen, its pale light reflecting off the wet sand, painting long shadows over the prisoners' gaunt faces. They had been told of the Americans' might, of their ruthlessness, and in their minds fear preceded every step. In the chaos of the Pacific theater, Japanese soldiers had endured years of relentless combat, often under the unyielding gaze of their own officers. They were trained to view surrender as shameful, defeat as dishonor, and capture as an unthinkable humiliation. Propaganda had painted the Americans as merciless, exploitive, and barbarous. Yet, as they entered the confines of the American camp, a quiet disbelief settled among them. There were no snarling guards, no immediate beatings, no humiliating inspections. Instead, they were met with measured gestures, calm instructions, and an almost clinical organization that contrasted starkly with their expectations. The historical context of these camps underscores the significance of this moment. By 1945, the United States had detained tens of thousands of Japanese soldiers across the Pacific, from the Philippines to Okinawa, in accordance with the Geneva Conventions. Despite the intensity of the Pacific conflict, American POW camps were designed not merely for containment, but for humane treatment. Prisoners were provided with food, clothing, medical attention, and shelter, resources that were scarce in the war-torn Pacific Islands. The goal was to uphold international law while maintaining order, but the Japanese POWs, conditioned by years of indoctrination and fear, perceived these gestures as almost incomprehensible. American abundance, as experienced through these camps, carried a symbolic weight far beyond food and shelter. It represented the promise of a society where law, organization, and ethics could govern human interaction, even amid the chaos of war. The bowl of rice, the neatly arranged bunk, the medical tent with its supplies, each became a quiet emblem of a democratic ideal, one that valued life over blind obedience, compassion over cruelty. In this sense, the camps were more than containment facilities. They were theaters in which ideology and humanity intersected, challenging prisoners to reconsider long-held assumptions and, in some cases, planting the seeds of post-war reconciliation. By the end of their captivity, the Japanese POWs carried away lessons that could not be unlearned. They had witnessed a system in which strength was measured not by the harshness of punishment, but by the steadiness of fairness and the provision of basic human needs. They had been confronted with an alternative vision of leadership, one in which authority could coexist with empathy, and abundance was a tool of stability rather than indulgence. These insights, etched deeply into memory, endured long after the war had ended. The poetic reflection of this chapter is found not in grand gestures, but in simple, enduring truths. As the prisoners were released and the gates of the camp swung open, they stepped into a world still marked by conflict, yet illuminated by the possibility of another way. The memory of respectful treatment, the bowl of rice, the orderly routines, they became symbols of a larger truth, that freedom and abundance, when tempered with humanity, possess a transformative power that can outlast the violence of war. In the quiet of those Pacific dawns, amid the scent of salt and the rustle of barbed wire, a lesson was written in the hearts of men who had expected cruelty and discovered dignity instead.
The contrast between expectation and reality was profound. Many Japanese soldiers had endured brutal conditions in their own army, starvation rations, harsh discipline, and ritualistic punishment for minor infractions. The American camp, by contrast, introduced a regimen that seemed strange yet comforting. Mealtimes were orderly, with nutritious food served in trays that reminded them of domestic abundance rather than military deprivation. Medical staff tended to wounds without recrimination, and guards maintained authority without cruelty. A recurring symbolic object, the simple bowl of rice, served as a quiet emblem of American abundance and ideological contrast. In Japan, rice often symbolized duty and endurance, rationed tightly and consumed under strict control. Here, the generous portions, clean and freely distributed, spoke not only of sustenance, but of a system rooted in respect for human life. Historical records reveal the depth of this dissonance. Private correspondence from Japanese POWs, preserved in National Archives collections, recounts disbelief at being addressed politely, at being asked if they were comfortable, at receiving sufficient medical attention after months of illness or injury. "We expected death or humiliation," one soldier wrote, "but instead we were treated as men." American camp logs from the same period confirm a strict adherence to Geneva protocols, emphasizing regular inspections, fair treatment, and educational programs designed to maintain both physical and mental well-being. Even high-ranking officers were surprised to find that their captors, whom they had imagined as merciless, operated with a system that blended discipline with dignity. The transformation wrought by these experiences cannot be understated. For many Japanese soldiers, exposure to American treatment challenged the deeply ingrained ideology that had governed their lives. Where once surrender was dishonorable, they began to recognize a different metric of strength, one rooted in fairness, structure, and humanity, rather than fear and domination. Letters sent after the war indicate that some POWs returned to Japan with a renewed perspective on governance, society, and even the concept of leadership, influenced indelibly by what they witnessed in captivity. The POW camp, in its quiet efficiency and unexpected kindness, became a site of cognitive dissonance, forcing a reckoning with previously unquestioned beliefs about enemy forces and the nature of power. Yet the emotional resonance of this experience was subtle and lingering. As prisoners walked through the camp under the watchful but non-threatening gaze of guards, the soundscape itself, the clatter of trays, the low murmur of orderly conversation, the steady cadence of daily routines became emblematic of a society built on abundance rather than deprivation. In letters and memoirs, many recalled how the smallest gestures, being handed a clean uniform, receiving a full meal without reprimand, or simply being addressed by name, left an enduring imprint of respect. These were acts that could not be measured in strategic victories or military engagements, but in the quiet transformation of human perception.